There is this proposal in the Washington State Senate that I think should be national news. I think every parent in the country should be concerned about things like this, should be talking about things like this. Bills like this are what terrify the hell out of me to even have a kid. There is this narrative that I have come to believe is more and more true by the day. It's something my friend Dory Monson used to talk about quite a bit. And I was sort of like, he's overblowing things. But in the last few years in Washington State, covering politics here, I just don't, it's undeniable to me. And that is that the government is trying to separate parents from their kids, take away the ability of a parent to make decisions about their kids' lives in critical aspects of their lives. And that's terrifying. And I think the older I get, the more I realize this. I don't have kids, but it's certainly a conversation that my fiance and I are having. And now these are the kind of things I think about, which is how much control do I have over my own child versus how much control schools have, how much control the government has. And this bill is really, I think, a continuation of a previous law passed in Washington State that gives kids over the age of 13 carte blanche to seek their own medical care without consulting their parents, which is wild to me. I know the arguments are, a kid might need birth control and they're too embarrassed to tell their parents that they're having sex. It's still not the government's responsibility to intervene. And to allow a kid over the age of 13 to go out to see a doctor for God knows what reason, for God knows what treatment, to get God knows what medication, and then they're living under their parents' roof. Their parents are trying, they believe, to raise their children, and then they have no idea what they're doing at a doctor's office. That's insane to me. It's insane to me. And this bill is not only a continuation of it, but it continues that divide between parents and kids and almost having the government replace parents and kids' lives. And I don't think it tries to hide it. So this is what I want to talk about today. This is going to be one of those call to action days to try to stop this thing in its tracks. I'm also going to be writing something about it. I don't know why it wasn't on my radar sooner. It is Senate Bill 5599. Senate Bill 5599. It is a completely Democrat-backed bill, no Republican support. The title of the bill, an act relating to supporting youth and young adults seeking protected health care services. So a few things to understand on background here. In Washington State, if you're a youth and you run away from home, and let's say you end up at a shelter for youth or a homeless shelter, that shelter is required to do two things. You have to call law enforcement, and you also have to call that child's rightful guardian, if one can be established. You have a certain amount of time before you're required. I think it's like 72 hours to call a child's guardian. But the important thing is when, you could have certainly some instances where a child is running away from abuse, for instance. But there are laws against that. And that's why if the child, can tell law enforcement, has now separated from that abusive situation, that's where I think it's appropriate for the government to step in and say, okay, we need to protect this child under law from abuse in the household. That is all very reasonable. That all makes sense. But to suggest that there aren't kids who run away from home for stupid reasons, who have perfectly fine parents, is also ridiculous. How many of you ran away from home in one form or another during your life? And so, calling the parents and saying, hey, we got your kid here, is appropriate. Now, Senate Bill 5599 would change these notification requirements in one particular instance. Senate Bill 5599 would say that, quote, a shelter for runaway or homeless youth does not need to contact the youth's parents if there is a compelling reason not to, which includes a youth seeking protected health services. So what the bill is saying is that if you have a teenager, let's say, who runs away from home, ends up at a youth shelter, and they're doing so because their parents will not allow them to get health services that are protected under the law. In those instances, the shelter could say, okay, we won't contact your parents so that you have cover to get these protected health services. Now, what would be a protected health service under the law? I'm glad you asked. Senate Bill 5599 points to this definition of protected healthcare services. It says protected healthcare services means gender-affirming treatment and reproductive healthcare services that are lawful in the state of Washington. It goes on to define reproductive healthcare services as all services, care, or products of a medical, surgical, psychiatric, therapeutic, mental health, behavioral health, diagnostic, preventative, rehabilitative, supportive, counseling, referral, prescribing, or dispensive nature relating to the human reproductive system, including but not limited to all services, care, and products relating to pregnancy, assisted reproduction, contraception, miscarriage management, or termination of a pregnancy, including self-managed termination. It defines gender-affirming treatment as healthcare services or products that support and affirm an individual's gender identity, including social, psychological, behavioral, and medical or surgical interventions. Medical or surgical interventions. The definition goes on to say gender-affirming care services include, but are not limited to, evaluation and treatments for gender dysphoria, gender-affirming hormone therapy, and gender-affirming surgical procedures. That paints a pretty startling picture of what Senate Bill 5599 would do. It would allow any child to run away from home, go to a youth shelter, and be protected by that shelter in order to get gender reassignment surgery, in order to terminate a pregnancy, all of it without their parents being notified. So in theory, you could have a child that runs away from a perfectly happy, healthy household, but perhaps a parent who doesn't want them to get gender reassignment surgery. That would be enough of a reason under Washington state law, if this passes, for that child to run away, to go to a shelter, to get gender reassignment surgery, a surgical intervention under the protection of the state of Washington, and then to return home a different gender. Imagine that. Imagine if that was your child. Now, the purpose of this law isn't cloudy. It isn't gray. It's very simple. And the key sponsor of this bill, State Senator Mark Elias, was very clear in what he's trying to do.
At the end of the day, I look forward to a future in Washington where every single family supports their trans youth to achieve the care and success that they need. Until that day, it's up to us to make sure that there are safe places for them to learn and grow and thrive. And this bill works to create that network of loving and supportive places so that all of our people can be successful and reach the potential that we were all given at our birth.
Until that day, it's up to us. And by that, he means it's up to the government. What he's saying is that the government knows better than every single parent in the state of Washington that would not support gender reassignment surgery for their child. That's exactly what he's saying there, and he's not hiding it. It is up to us to provide that safe space.
At the end of the day, I look forward to a future in Washington where every single family supports their trans youth to achieve the care and success that they need. Until that day, it's up to us to make sure that there are safe places for them to learn and grow and thrive.
No matter how you feel about transgender issues, gender reassignment surgery for youth, that's terrifying. That's terrifying that the government would go to those lengths, admit it's going to those lengths, admit that it believes it knows better than you do what your child needs to be happy and healthy. Now, there are two issues at play here, and I want to make sure that there's a distinction. I have no issue with transgender individuals whatsoever. I think transgender rights are human rights. I absolutely believe that there are people who are born one gender who just feel in their heart and soul that they are meant to be the other gender. If you are an adult, I don't care how you live your life. I truly, as long as you're not hurting or harming anyone else, I don't care how you live your life. And if gender reassignment surgery as an adult is going to make you happy in your time here on earth, absolutely have at it. Not my issue. Now, when it comes to youth, again, I would defer to parents. Who am I if a parent says, I've got my 17-year-old kid, they want gender reassignment surgery or hormone therapy? Who am I to tell that parent that that's not in the best interest of their child? Now, do I agree with it? No. I think that when you're a child, when you are easily susceptible to the influence of your peers, when you are still developing your brain and what you want to do in life, I don't think that you should do something, or a parent should let their child do something that could alter the course of their life forever, biologically. But again, I would defer to parents. The state is taking this so far in saying not only is it not okay for parents to have the opinion that their child should not get reconstructive surgery to change their gender, but we will pass a law that makes it okay for that child to run away from home, hold up at a shelter, and then we will help facilitate their ability to get this healthcare service. And then at some point, if they want to go back home, great. And this isn't going to be just Washington teens. You don't think that kids from across the country will find out that Washington allows for this, that they can show up at a shelter in Washington state, that their parents won't be called, and that they can head back to their home state however many months or years later after having whatever gender care that they desired? Come on, guys, that's not common sense. That's not right. So again, it's the issue of transgender issue, and you have to separate that from the government interfering in the relationship between parents and teens, parents and kids. By definition of the government and the state senators who are backing this bill, you're a bad parent. You're an abusive parent if you won't let your child get gender reassignment surgery. I imagine there's a lot of you out there who are just fine with transgender issues, who don't care, who would support your child, no matter what their gender identity is, no matter what their sexual orientation is. But I would bet that you want to have a say in any sort of surgical or medical intervention that they might feel that they need. This would take that right away from you as a parent. And not only that, this bill comes with $7.5 million in funding to help facilitate all of this. So the government is doing this at a cost to taxpayers. It's not as if they're just lifting a restriction or lifting a requirement on these shelters to notify parents. No, they're actively funding it. They're actively funding it with taxpayer dollars. I struggle so much to see how they in their own minds can justify this. And when I hear that statement from Senator Marco Elias, I think, how dare you? How dare you think you can take the place of a parent in Washington state, a good, loving parent who simply has some concerns about allowing their child to have a surgery that changes their physical attributes at the age of 15, 16, 17. How dare you believe that you know best, that you have to take over?
I look forward to a future in Washington where every single family supports their trans youth to achieve the care and success that they need. Until that day, it's up to us to make sure that there are safe places.
And there has been ample pushback. 4,500 people signed up in opposition to this bill to speak out against it. 4,500 people.
A minor who is the sole responsibility of a parent by nature who has no indication of a troubled home or utters the magic words of protected healthcare will disappear from the radar of their parent or guardian. There is no safety net for the grieving parent. This bill legalizes the kidnapping of minors and, coupled with SB 5489, will make Washington State a black hole for minors.
We all want, of course, what's best for the children. We all want to give vulnerable children that are confused every opportunity to resolve their mental health issues, if that's what it is, or support and good care and safe environments. I think maybe we see differently, though, what constitutes healthy care.
Parents are the primary caretakers of their children and are the ones who are most familiar with their children's unique needs. To cut them out is an affront to what I would consider to be the natural order of things.
Parents know and understand a child's mental health history, comorbidities, and have a right to know about their child's location. Thank you for voting no on this bill.
This is as egregious a law as I've ever seen introduced in Washington State in 13 years. And again, it's a furtherance of the law they already passed that allows kids to make their own healthcare decisions. And, you know, a couple of the comments I've seen online over pushback of this is, well, do you want kids to kill themselves? Because if kids don't get this, they'll kill themselves. Look, of course you don't want kids to kill themselves. Of course you don't want kids. It's such a straw man argument. Of course you don't want kids to kill themselves. But when you dictate, when you say, if we don't do this, then they're going to kill themselves. If the government doesn't take over, then they're going to kill themselves. Where does that stop? How does that also help foster a healthy, stable child? To say, have the government say, hey, run away from home. Go to a youth shelter. Get surgery that could change your life and your hormones, and then you'll feel better. And then you'll feel better, and then you'll be better. And you'll be perfectly happy with your parents when you go home, and your life will be great. Come on. So here's what I'm asking of you today. We need to send emails, especially if you're a parent who's got a teen, about the impact that this could have on your household, on any household, about, from your perspective as a parent, why you think this is dangerous. And hey, if you're in support of it, send an email too. I'm all for that, whatever. But I don't think there's a lot of people who listen to this show who are in support of this bill. I want you to send emails to the bill's sponsors. Keep them civil. Speak from the heart as a parent. But just make sure that they hear your dissent on this. State Senator Marco Lias. State Senator Marco Lias is the key sponsor. State Senator Claire Wilson. State Senator Manka Dhingra. Add that to the list of things you need to email Manka Dhingra about. State Senator Emily Randall. State Senator Joe Wynn. And State Senator Liz Lovelit. State Senator Liz Lovelit. Again, speak from the heart as a parent. Talk about this, not from, even if you are not in support of gender reassignment care for teens, just talk about it from a place of love and let them know why we are going down a really slippery slope, why we are going down a really dangerous path in Washington State when it comes to taking blatant actions to separate kids from their parents.